That's just an amazing, amazing, amazing thing that happens as we are doing it right. So physical intimacy is the most physical we can get, and yet we're going to do it in a way that's really focusing on God, focusing on godliness. And as I'm saying, it's something we really have to, for a lot of women, we don't look at it properly. It's hard for a lot of women to look at it properly, as I said, because we're tired, because we've got a lot of other things going on in our life. And we really have to reframe it as this is a very significant act for my marriage, and this is a very godly act. And I have to look at it as something very significant and very godly. And I really have to give my husband the sense that intimacy is important to me. And giving my husband that sense that intimacy is important to me helps build my husband, helps him be the husband that he needs to be. So it's something that I really have to work on. Like, we know that. I have to work it on to show him that this is important to me. Because I'm really showing him that the marriage is important to me. Like, I have to make the bedroom a very important room in the house. I should make the bedroom a very beautiful room. I should buy the linen for the bedroom before the kids' room, before the guests' room. I should buy the beautiful linen for our bedroom. Because that's saying that it's important, and that's making it beautiful, which is really important. Some people can have a candle burning in the bedroom to fill it with a good smell. We were saying last week about a woman being beautiful. Our sages say these things enhance a person. A beautiful wife, a beautiful home. The room should express beauty. It should express love. It should express sensuality. It should be clean. It should be inviting. The bed shouldn't be narrow and small and uncomfortable. You want a room that's inviting and comfortable, and saying this is really, really, really important. This is really, really important to the marriage. And if you think of the steps that lead to marriage, you have the finding out about the person, you have the shidduch, you have the courtship, you have the engagement, you have the marriage, you have the intimacy. And all those steps are really important, should constantly be in the marriage. So like when you're finding out about this person, you're doing the research. So you're focusing on, does he have my priorities? What's his perspective on kids, on Torah, on family, on friends? So that's supposed to keep going now, this idea of, are we in sync? Are our priorities the same? In other words, a lot of times, before you're married, you're thinking about him, what are his priorities and values. When you are married, you're focusing on what are his flaws and what's he lacking. So don't lose that first investigative space in the relationship, right? When you're first looking into him, what are his values? What are his priorities? You weren't saying, is he perfect? Guess what? He's not. So you knew that. You weren't asking that then. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says, there's no perfection on either side of the mechitza. We're not perfect. They're not perfect. So you knew that. So you were never saying, is he perfect? Because you know he's not perfect. You were saying, tell me the good. Let me find how good is his good. So that initial space of doing the research and focusing on, do we match? Are we compatible? Is this a good shidduch? Never want to lose that. Don't get stuck on the flaws. Get stuck on the mutual values, outlook, the building. You know, like when you're upset with your spouse, God forbid that ever happens, but sometimes does. You want to see him as you were looking at him then. You want to see the whole picture. You want to look at every one of his flaws that are driving you crazy and try to reframe it and see it for the positive it potentially could be. You know, there's a story with a rabbi. I don't know if this is true or not. It might just be a story, but it might be true. It doesn't really make a difference. That a man comes to the rabbi and we could switch this around. The men are complaining about their wives, but we could switch it around. But I'm not going to totally make up the story because this is a story, so it might have happened. So the man comes to the rabbi and he starts complaining about his wife, and the house is a mess. It's a disaster. She is such a, not in touch with balabasta can be. And the rabbi's listening to all this, and he heads to the men, how many children do you have? And thank God there were many children. And the rabbi said, well, maybe because she's more relaxed, she can have so many children. You know, like maybe if she was a little more obsessively, compulsively clean, she wouldn't be able to do it. Okay. The next man comes into the rabbi and he starts complaining about his wife. Oh my gosh, she is so obsessive, compulsive. He takes off his coat, 15 seconds later, it's gone. You know, oh my gosh, he can't live like this anymore. And the rabbi says, do you know where the Scotch tape is in your house? He says, of course. It's in the same place for the past 15 years. So the rabbi says, wow, think of how much time your wife is saving you because she's so organized. So it's really a very strong, great story for us. And we just have to switch it around, you know, but it's the same point. If the woman's too relaxed, thank God she can have the kids. The woman's too clean, thank God she you know where all your stuff are. Looking at all those things that drive us crazy and just be that wise rabbi and see the thank God in it. So that was the first stage in the marriage, when you look into him, when you find out the scoop. And that stage, in a sense, should always survive your marriage. The next stage is the courtship, the shidduch process. Now, of course, we know in the courtship and the shidduch process, we're on our best behaviors, we're very focused, we're listening to what he's saying. Imagine always being in that courtship space, always listening and being focused and giving time to the other person. And then you're engaged. This is a successful shidduch. You're engaged. Well, the overarching energy when you're engaged is this excitement for the wedding. All the plans, the enormous investment in the marriage. Imagine being always that invested in your marriage. When you're engaged, you are so invested in your marriage. There's nothing more important than your marriage. So that's the engaged space that you would like to always maintain. You're also a basket case, but we don't want to maintain that. But the enormous investment in the marriage, that's what we would like to maintain. And with the marriage, and with the intimacy, to keep invested, to keep focused, to keep working. It's not always easy to do that, but that's what is really us, like we said, the pnimi, the motor that keeps this marriage running, that keeps building our husbands to become the men they could be with our support, with our emotional support, with our love of them. Remember we said how like the imahos, the matriarchs, got it, so to speak, better than their husbands, were more grounded. They saw what their men couldn't see, right? Sarah and Rivka saw what Avram and Yitzchak could not see. That's female energy. You're always going to see what your husband can't see. And then you're going to help bring him to that space. This really relates Kabbalistically to our spiritual roots. Kabbalistically, Hashem's essence name is of 4 letters, a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. And each of these is going to be a little Kabbalistic, but just to explain some of the female masculine dimensions by understanding the Kabbalistic roots, because those Kabbalistic roots are the roots of these relationships. So if we understand them better, we can better utilize them. So there's a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. And Kabbalistically, it's explained that we can spell those letters, Hey and Vav, specifically in various different ways. Meaning Yud is always a Yud. Yud is spelled Yud Vav Dal. That means Yud. But Hey could be Hey. It could be Hey Hey. It could be Hey Aleph Hey. Vav could be Vav. It could be Vav Vav. It could be Vav Aleph Vav. So all the different combinations of how you spell out the letters of the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey create God's 4 basic energies. An energy that numeric value is 45, referred to as Ma, which is 45. An energy that's 52, Ban. which spells out 52. And then there are two higher ones, Sag and Ab, 63 and 72, that we're not going to touch on now. Those are higher than our world. We're focusing on our world's energies. So we have Ma, 45, and we have Ban, 52. Now, the rule is, to get all this Kabbalistic knowledge quickly, the higher the number, the more power. So Ma is, in a sense, the weakest. It's 45. Ban is 52. Sag is 63. Ab is 72. So it's the weakest. But when we're looking at Ban versus Ma, Ban is stronger. It's 52, but it's also coarser, as Ban is the same numerical value as the word behemoth, which means an animal. So 45 is more refined and weaker. 52 is stronger and less refined. So why am I giving you this little course on Kabbalah? Because we're told that women embody Ban and men embody Ma, which means we have an innately higher spiritual source. For all of you that always knew and saw that women are more spiritual than men, you're right. We have a higher spiritual source. We're 52, they're 45. Okay, 7 more, like, electoral college, how many points? No, it's a real incredible different energy. There's not like 7 more points. There's the energy of 45, there's a totally different energy of 52. Women have a totally different energy than men. Our energy is much more spiritual. As we see, women are much more spiritual. They have a much higher, stronger spiritual energy. Yet, it's a more raw energy. It's more physical. That's a woman. We're more physical. We're more enmeshed in the physical, as that's what we spent a lot of time dealing with. Men are like weaker energy, 45, but a more refined energy. And that's why it says, again, Kabbalistically, the man is Ma, 45, the woman is Ban, 52, and the soul is Ma, 45, and the body is Ban, 52. So obviously you say, well, the soul is a lot more spiritual than the body. Well, on a sense, another sense, not at all. It says by Mashiach, the energy, the spiritual energy of the body will feed the spiritual energy of the soul. So the body obviously is a lot more physical than the soul. On the surface, less spiritual energy, but its core actually much more spiritual energy than the soul itself, which is a very deep conversation that we don't have to really get into here. But that's the idea of why we, more than the men, can use the physical to serve God. Because our energy is Ban, that's more physical than the man's and more spiritual than the man's. Ma is less physical. Ban is more physical. Ma is weaker spiritual. Ban is stronger spiritual. So we have stronger spiritual energies and we have stronger physical energies. And that's why we can do it. We can take the physical, as we're saying, the act of intimacy itself, and invest in it a spiritual. A woman has a far greater shot at making intimacy spiritual than a man does. Far more, for many reasons, including this very Kabbalistic understanding of a man and a woman, that we can make the act of intimacy spiritual, which, as we mentioned last week, is very necessary for children and in general for the powers of intimacy. Another Kabbalistic understanding of men, women, and marriage. We said the woman is our Malchus, which is God's 10th and seemingly lowest power. Malchus means sovereignty. We're told by Mashiach that which is lowest will be revealed at its highest. And Malchus, which is again the 10th and the lowest, there's 9 above it. I could enumerate for you 9 higher powers. But the 10th, Malchus, will be revealed by Mashiach as the most powerful. And that's women. Women embody Malchus. Which is why...
No, I can hear.
You can't hear?
I can hear.
Oh, okay. That's very scary. Rachalea, were you hearing the whole time and just not now, or were you not hearing the whole time?
No,
Is it just now or was it the whole time?
Thanks.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I think it's
It
her
could,
internet.
it could be your internet connection. I think we lost Rachalea. Sometimes the internet connection. Everyone else can hear me? Simcha said she could hear me. Can everyone else hear me? Can anyone else hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, fine, good. Because you know this is the fear of any teacher in this type of setting. Rachalea just touched on one of my essence fears is you're talking, and nobody hears a thing. And you have no clue. You just think it's a nice, quiet audience, right? Not that I ever want a nice, quiet audience. I'd like people to participate. But okay, can you hear now, Rachalea? Yes? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for saying it. Sometimes it's the connection to the internet. Sometimes your volume could be low. I mean, I've had this myself when I'm listening to like recordings that my volume is too low on my computer. It was neither of the two. Okay, you solved your problems. I'm glad. I did make a commitment to myself to end at 10:15 because I remember last week we ended at 10:30 and I felt it was like a little late for a lot of people. So we're gonna try to just wrap up on this point, but it's a really powerful point. So we're saying, first we were speaking Kabbalistically, a woman is Ban, she's 52, stronger spiritual energies and stronger physical energies. And now we're saying a woman embodies, as we said earlier, and we're going to say this many times on many different levels because it's a foundational way of understanding the relationship of a man and a woman. So we will come back to it many times, on many angles. A woman is Malchus. Malchus is number 10 of God's powers. It's the bottom of the barrel. It's viewed as the lowest. It's viewed as the weakest. And by Mashiach, it will be revealed as the strongest and most dominant. And that's the energy of a woman, which is why, you know, the sages say, we're always given this quote, in the merit of the righteous woman, Mashiach's coming, in the merit of the righteous woman, we were redeemed from Egypt. In the merit of those same righteous women, us, because we're a reincarnation of those that left Egypt, we will be redeemed in the future. I'm sure you all know that. So the women are the bringers of Mashiach. The men also know that. They're like, why should we bother working? You women are going to do it, right? So the women are the ones bringing Mashiach. Why are the women the ones bringing Mashiach? Because Mashiach is our energy. Because the energy of Mashiach is God's Malchus, God's sovereignty. And the energy of God's sovereignty, Malchus, that's me, that's a woman. So just as now sovereignty, Malchus, looks like number 10 of the 10 dimensions, looks like the lowest. And by Mashiach, the whole thing can be turned upside down around to be revealed, like we said, Eshes Chayla Teres Baila. The woman of valor is the crown, higher than, on top of her husband. That's the same dynamics of a woman. So we are the energy of Malchus. We are the energy that seems lower, but is in truth much, much, much higher. That's why we're the ones bringing Mashiach, because Mashiach is our energy. And it will be revealed by Mashiach, the power of Malchus and the power of the woman. Just as it will be revealed by Mashiach, the power of the body. Remember I said, by Mashiach, the energy of the body feeds the energy of the soul. Body, woman, Ban, woman, Malchus, Mashiach, all of that. We can make a challenge of all of these ideas. They're all bringing out the same point. Our energy is the energy of Mashiach, which means practically, if you want to make Kabbalah practical, Malchus is the energy of receiving, right? We said that. Malchus, it says Kabbalistically, if you want the Kabbalistic quote, Les le migarmuha klum. She's got nothing of her own. She's empty. She's an empty vessel that's filled by the 9 higher dimensions. So she's the weakest. She has nothing of her own, literally. But in the end, she has more power than any of them because she's absorbing and expressing from all of the 9 higher powers. That's a woman. We're saying the man's the giver, the woman's the receiver. Don't get fooled by that sentence. As we're receiving, we're absorbing the powers greater and greater and greater than the recipient who gave them. Malchus is the power of creation. It's God's power of creation. God creates through Malchus. It's God's speech. You know, women have that quality of speech because we come from God's speech, Malchus. God creates through speech. All of these are feminine powers. Feminine power is godly power speech. It's a godly power creation. Women are the creators. They're the ones that ultimately create a Jewish child because Malchus is God's power of creation. Creation, speech, receiving as a means of giving. This is how Kabbalah explains feminine energy. So we really need to understand ourselves because in the current modern world, what the modern world would really want, what lots of women that we're not going to mention here tonight would want, is for us to be men, to be conquerors. That's like, wow, it'd be so cool if we could just take all the women and make them men. But if a person tries to do so, it's not going to work. They're not true to themselves, and they're not true to their very, very special, very, very feminine powers of being recipients and thus givers. We're recipients, and in this way, we're givers. We're creators. We're nurturers. That's how God looks at us. That's how Torah looks at us. The woman's the recipient, the woman's the giver. The woman's the recipient, the woman's the creator. The woman's the recipient, the woman's the nurturer. Here, of course, we're speaking about nurturing our husbands. We're speaking about nurturing our marriage. Obviously, we nurture our children. And obviously, we're supposed to nurture the world around us. And we're supposed to bring the whole world to a greater, deeper connection to God because we're the nurturers because of this power. So it's really, really important when you go into a marriage to understand what it means to be a woman. Because if you're out of sync of what it means to be a woman, it's much harder to make the marriage work properly. Because you're not doing it within God's box, within God's vision of the woman, God's vision of the man. And as we're saying, I think the strongest example of how the woman specifically is there to nurture and bring connection of God to the world is that a Jewish woman creates a Jewish child. Uniquely. As a nurturer, we have the ability to nurture that soul and bring another piece of God into this world, bring another Jew into this world. And that's a unique to a woman energy. We're receiving that godly energy. We're nurturing that godly spark. The man, if he's in a good space, is a great conqueror. The man, if he's in a good space, he's a great giver. We want him to be a great giver and a great conqueror. But he's not going to be a great nurturer because that's our ability. He can't receive. He can't nurture. He can't hold that precious Jewish spark. So therefore, a Jewish man can't produce a Jewish child, but a Jewish woman can produce a Jewish child. It's really, really, really important to understand ourselves, to be ourselves, to understand our husbands, to know his strengths, to know what he is, and to know what he's not. Because sometimes we have very inappropriate expectations. Inappropriate not meaning they're bad, just meaning they're not true. They're not real. They're not going to happen. He's not you. He's not Malchus. He's not Ban. Appreciate and view him for what he is. The mashpia, the influencer, the ma, help him access his mashpia, influencer nature by being a real recipient who elicits the influencer to give. That's the best model of an amazing husband-wife relationship. I'm going to say that line again because it's just so expressing this idea. See if I can remember what I said. Be the real recipient that elicits the influencer, the mashpia, the husband, to be a great giver. Pull out of him his ability to give to you. He's at his healthiest then, and so are you. It's sometimes really hard for us to get into that space. It's so contrary to everything we've absorbed in the world around us. But this is God's vision of a great marriage, of a woman at her most womanly and a man at his most manly, and making together a beautiful, beautiful, strong, strong marriage and a godly marriage. So we're going to stop at this point. There were no questions. Amazing. I hope that doesn't mean it's just too late for people to process. Rachalea, do you want to give me your number so I can add you to the group? So then you get directly reminded about this great class?
Sure.
Okay,
773
just one second.